Tuesday mornings at the downtown courthouse were usually uneventful, just another slow grind through routine cases. Outside, the Florida sun filtered through palm trees lining the street, and the scent of early morning rain still lingered in the air. Inside courtroom 3B, the air was cooler, almost too quiet, save for the occasional shuffle of papers, the creak of old wooden pews, and the muffled conversations of lawyers preparing their arguments. Judge Elaine McCarthy sat at the elevated bench at the front, her thick-framed glasses resting at the tip of her nose. Her fingers moved lazily through a stack of case files. She wasn't expecting much excitement today. A few probation hearings, a pre-trial motion or two, maybe a suspended license case. Bailiff Officer Henry checked the time. 8:56 a.m., 4 minutes until session began. He nodded toward the gallery, where people were beginning to settle into their seats. Among them sat witnesses, a few family members, and even some curious college students on a criminal justice field trip. Nothing out of the ordinary. Then came the subtle click of boots echoing against the marble floor. Officer Daniels walked in, tall, clean-shaven, and alert as always. He wore his usual dark uniform, service weapon holstered, and beside him walked Max, his loyal canine partner. Max's coat gleamed under the courtroom's overhead lights, his leash held loosely in Daniel's hand. He was well-trained, precise in movement, and remarkably calm in tense environments. The kind of dog that never barked, unless it really mattered. People barely noticed the dog enter. Most had seen Police K-9 South before. It wasn't unusual for Daniels and Max to be in the courtroom during high-profile days. Still, today's docket didn't suggest anything dangerous or dramatic. Everything seemed normal. Daniels gave a small nod to Henry and positioned himself and Max near the courtroom's double doors. Max sat obediently beside his handler, his tongue lolling slightly as he scanned the room. His ears flicked once, twice. His nose wrinkled in that sharp, deliberate way that only working dogs do when catching a scent. Daniels felt a subtle tug on the leash, but thought nothing of it. Across the room, Judge McCarthy called out, "Let's bring the room to order." The gavel struck once. A few heads turned forward. The attorneys stepped toward their tables. Voices hushed. Max's ears perked again. He shifted his weight forward, muscles tightening. Then, just as the courtroom slipped into silence, Max let out a low growl. Daniels blinked and looked down. The sound wasn't aggressive, not yet. It was more like a warning. Barely audible, but clearly intentional. Daniels gave the leash a slight pull. "Easy, boy," he muttered under his breath. Max's eyes didn't move. They were locked on something across the room, a specific bench near the back wall, where a couple of people were seated. Nothing seemed suspicious about them. A young woman in a red hoodie, an elderly man, a man in a suit, possibly another attorney. Then Max stood, not in a sudden leap, but in a stiff, alert motion that Daniels recognized all too well. Max's body language said something was wrong. The dog's nose lifted, air sniffed, and he took a slow step forward. Still silent, still composed, but focused. Daniels frowned. Max had only ever done this when detecting drugs, explosives, or concealed human scent. But none of that made sense in a courtroom on a Tuesday morning. The judge continued speaking, unaware. First on the docket, State versus Michael Donnelly, defense ready? But Max wasn't interested in the case. He let out a sharp, piercing bark. The sound cracked through the quiet courtroom like a gunshot. Several people jumped. The woman in the red hoodie dropped her phone. The elderly man blinked, confused. The man in the suit scooted closer to the edge of the bench. The judge looked up sharply. "What's going on?" Daniels tried to quiet Max. "Max, heel!" He commanded in a low, firm tone. Max didn't listen. Instead, he took another step forward, eyes still locked on the back bench. His body was tense now, alert and ready, tail stiff. He let out another bark, this one louder, followed by a low, continuous growl that rumbled deep in his chest. Now all eyes were on Max. Daniels held the leash tightly. "Something's wrong," he said out loud, mostly to himself, but loud enough for Henry to hear. The judge stood. "Officer, control your animal." "I'm trying," Daniels replied, concern creeping into his voice. Henry stepped down from his post and walked toward Daniels. "What's he doing?" Daniels didn't take his eyes off Max. "I don't know. He's alerting. Strong." Henry raised an eyebrow. "Drugs?" "Doubt it," Daniels said. "Not that kind of alert." The gallery shifted nervously. Some people stood. Others looked under the benches near them, unsure what they were supposed to be looking for. Max barked again, this time louder and more aggressive. He pulled hard on the leash, dragging Daniels a step forward. The judge finally spoke again, voice stern. "Court is in recess. Everyone please exit the room in an orderly fashion." People began filing out, quickly, but not running. Max's growling deepened. He was now only 10 feet from the bench. Henry looked toward the side. "I'll check it out." "No," Daniels said. "Let's go together." They approached. Slowly, Max pulled harder. Daniels could feel the dog's entire body trembling, not with fear, but with a kind of intense instinctual readiness. His eyes never left the space beneath the far right bench. Henry turned on his flashlight. Daniels reached for his baton. Max barked again. Then came a moment that neither man would ever forget. As Henry crouched and shined the light under the bench, he inhaled sharply. Daniels followed his gaze. There, pressed against the wall, hidden behind a thin strip of paneling and barely visible in the dark, was a man, curled into a tight ball, eyes wide open, breathing shallow, completely still. For a moment, everything froze. Daniel's heart pounded in his ears. "Is he armed?" Henry asked in a whisper. Daniels shook his head. "No idea. Don't move." Max was still, growling. The man under the bench blinked, the only sign that he was even alive. Daniels reached for his radio. "Dispatch, we have a concealed male suspect hiding under the benches in courtroom 3B. Requesting backup immediately." Outside, the courthouse remained calm. But inside 3B, the routine morning had turned into something no one would forget. And it all started with one bark. A courtroom is a place of order. Silence isn't just expected, it's demanded. Every shuffle of paper, every whispered word, is typically met with a sharp look from the judge or bailiff. So when Max, the canine, let out a bark that rang through the room like a siren, it didn't just interrupt the proceedings. It shattered the illusion of control. Everyone froze. Judge McCarthy's gavel slammed down once, loud and firm. "Officer Daniels," she barked, "what is the meaning of this?" Daniels didn't answer right away. His hand gripped Max's leash tightly as the dog pulled forward again, body tense, growl low and threatening. Max wasn't just acting up. Daniels had worked with him for 4 years. He'd seen Max detect hidden drugs, track armed suspects, and once even sniff out a loaded weapon stashed in a courthouse bathroom. But this was different. There was urgency in his body, the kind that said danger was close and real. "I'm sorry, Your Honor," Daniels said carefully, eyes still on Max. "He's alerting to something. I don't have control." The gallery began shifting uncomfortably. People exchanged looks. Someone muttered, "Is there a bomb?" Everybody remained calm, the judge ordered. But even her voice had a tremble now. Max barked again, short, sharp, right toward the same bench at the back. Daniels stepped forward, pulled slightly on the leash, trying to hold Max back. But Max's front paws slid forward like he was dragging his whole body toward something. Invisible, that bench. Daniels scanned the people sitting there. 3 individuals. One, an elderly man with a walking stick. Another, a college-aged woman in a hoodie. And finally, a guy in a charcoal suit. All 3 looked confused, maybe frightened. None of them made sudden movements. None looked armed or threatening. But Max didn't care. His eyes stayed locked. Under the bench. Something's wrong, Daniels muttered again, more to himself now. Officer Henry, the bailiff, approached with narrowed eyes. I think we need to clear the room. The judge seemed to agree. 5-minute recess. Clear the courtroom now. Bailiffs, assist. The people in the gallery stood hesitantly, uncertain whether they should rush or remain calm. A few clutched their belongings tightly. One woman stepped to the side and took out her phone, beginning to film. Daniels didn't move with them. Neither did Max. Max was now pawing the floor, nails scratching at the marble tile, like he was trying to dig through it. His growl had deepened. The hairs on his back stood up. The moment was electric, heavy with the unknown. Henry moved cautiously toward the bench. He knelt slowly, flashlight drawn from his belt. Daniels joined him, keeping Max in check as the dog strained forward. Let's take this slow, Henry whispered. Could be nothing. Could be ... something. Daniels nodded but didn't answer. Henry turned on the flashlight and aimed it beneath the wooden bench. At first, there was nothing unusual, just shadows, dusty floor, and a few crumpled napkins. Then he stopped. His light froze on something that made him go pale. Daniels noticed his sudden stillness. What is it? Henry didn't answer. At first, he leaned slightly closer, and when he finally spoke, his voice was tight. There's someone under there. Daniels's heart skipped. What? Henry pulled back slightly and whispered again. It's a person, curled up, behind the paneling. Everything in Daniel's body tensed. He gave Max a quiet command, and the dog went still growling, but now rooted to the spot like a statue. Henry stood. We need backup now. Daniels clicked his radio. Dispatch, this is Officer Daniels in courtroom 3B. We've got a concealed individual under one of the gallery benches. Requesting immediate assistance. Unknown status. Repeat, unknown status. The voice on the other end responded quickly. Copy that. Units en route. Inside the courtroom, the last of the spectators were being ushered out. A few resisted. Who is it? One man asked. Is it a shooter? Another shouted. Is there a bomb? Daniels ignored them. His focus was now completely locked on the space beneath the bench. The man under there hadn't moved, not an inch. Just a pair of wide, terrified eyes stared back at him through a gap in the wooden frame. Daniels crouched now, speaking calmly. Hey, I see you, okay? We're not gonna hurt you, but you need to come out slowly. Hands where I can see them. No response. Do you have a weapon? Daniels asked. The man blinked slowly. Are you injured? Still no answer. Henry lowered his voice. He might be in shock, or high. Daniels nodded. Or dangerous. He slowly unclipped Max's lead and pointed to the floor. Guard, he said softly. Max moved a half-step forward, teeth bared just slightly, but didn't lunge. The man twitched. Daniels saw the shift in body language immediately. Fear. A real, animal kind of fear. That's when he knew. This man wasn't just hiding. He was running. But from what? Or who? Listen, Daniels said again, more firmly this time. This dog? He will not hesitate if you make a move. You don't want that. You need to come out. Now. Still silence. Then, slowly, shakily, the man began to move. One hand crept out first, pale and trembling. Then the other. Finally, his entire upper body slithered forward until he emerged into the open. Gasps echoed from the hallway. Daniels's eyes went wide. The man was filthy, his clothes torn and dusty, his hair slick with sweat, face gaunt. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days. But it wasn't just his condition that struck Daniels. It was his face. Wait a minute, Henry said, already reaching for his radio. I know this guy. Daniels kept his hand on his holster. Get him in cuffs. The man didn't resist. He raised his hands, tears forming in the corners of his eyes. I didn't want to hurt anybody, he mumbled. I just needed to see what they were saying. What who was saying? Daniels asked. But the man clammed up. Henry pulled out his phone, typed quickly, then showed Daniels a mugshot. Same man. Cleaner, healthier, but unmistakable. Raymond J. Keller, a fugitive. Wanted for drug trafficking, armed robbery, and skipping trial 10 months earlier. And he had somehow made it into the courthouse, undetected, until Max barked. The courtroom that had buzzed with quiet routine only minutes earlier was now filled with a cold, invisible tension, the kind that creeps into your bones when something isn't right, but you can't explain why. The doors had been shut. The public cleared. Only officers remained inside with Judge McCarthy, Officer Daniels, Max, and the mysterious man who'd just been pulled from beneath the bench. Outside in the hallway, muffled voices of court staff and deputies swelled, trying to figure out what just happened. Inside, no one spoke. Raymond Keller sat on the floor in handcuffs, back to the wall, chest rising and falling in rapid breaths. His skin was pale, damp with sweat and streaked with dirt. His clothes, a gray hoodie and black jeans, were rumpled and smelled like mold and stale fear. He hadn't shaved in weeks. But his eyes? They darted, alert, calculating, like he was still on the run, even now. Max, still on guard, stood a few feet away. His growling had stopped, but his eyes never left Keller. His ears were perked, stance firm, every inch of him ready to pounce if given the command. Daniel stepped back, exhaling slowly. I can't believe it, he muttered. Judge McCarthy had stepped down from the bench and stood beside the bailiff, her face twisted in a mix of confusion and restrained panic. Officer, who is this man? What's going on? Henry spoke up, holding his phone. Your Honor, this is Raymond J. Keller. He's a fugitive skipped trial 10 months ago. Multiple warrants. Drug charges, armed robbery, resisting arrest, and unlawful possession of firearms. The judge's eyes widened. And he was under my courtroom bench? Yes, ma'am, Daniels said, hiding the whole time. Max sniffed him out. For a moment, there was only the sound of Max's breathing and the quiet hiss of the overhead air vents. How the hell did he get in? McCarthy asked sharply. Daniels crouched beside Keller, who was staring at the floor now, avoiding eye contact. That's a good question, Daniels said, turning toward him. Want to explain how you snuck past courthouse security and ended up under a bench like a rat? Keller said nothing. He swallowed hard, lips dry, fingers twitching. Henry pressed. Were you armed? No, Keller croaked, voice hoarse. Didn't come to hurt anyone. Then why were you hiding in a courtroom where your name wasn't even on the docket? Daniels asked. Keller hesitated. Wasn't here for court? McCarthy folded her arms. Then why were you here at all? Keller shifted uncomfortably. I heard my brother might testify today. Your brother? Daniels repeated. Yeah, I think he's flipping. Cutting a deal. I just wanted to see if it was true. So you broke into a courthouse? Henry snapped. You crawled under a bench like a cockroach just to watch? Keller looked up at them, and for the first time, there was no defiance in his eyes, only desperation. I didn't have a plan. I didn't even know what I was doing. I was sleeping in a drainage pipe 2 blocks from here. Someone told me he was cooperating. I had to know. Daniel stood. Security footage is going to tell the rest. Let's check it. He radioed dispatch. This is Officer Daniels. I need full security cam review for this morning. Courthouse entrance, lobby, hallways, especially near courtroom 3B. Suspect is confirmed fugitive Keller Raymond J. Copy, the dispatcher replied. CCTV logs already pulling. McCarthy looked toward the exit. Bring in the chief of security. I want to know how someone with an active warrant just walked in here and hid 10 feet from me. Keller coughed suddenly, a dry, hacking sound. I got in during the fire drill, he said between breaths. Security rushed everyone outside. They opened the side doors. I followed a group of guys in suits. No one noticed. Daniels and Henry exchanged a look. That fire drill had taken place just after 8 a.m., around the time court staff were just arriving. With a hoodie and confident walk, Keller could have passed for a public defender or clerk. You got lucky, Daniels muttered. But your luck ended when Max walked in. Keller looked at the dog, just a glance, and shook his head. He knew right away. Yeah, Daniels replied. He always does. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, 2 sheriff's deputies reviewed CCTV footage from the courthouse's main security office. The video confirmed Keller's story. 8:06 a.m., during the fire drill, a man in a hoodie and jeans quietly slipped through a back hallway door with a crowd of employees. No one stopped him. No one even noticed. At 8:14 a.m., another camera captured him entering courtroom 3B, empty at the time. He walked to the far side of the gallery and ducked behind the bench. The angle didn't show the exact hiding motion, but after that frame, he disappeared. Damn, one deputy said. He was in there for nearly an hour. By 9:12 a.m., when Max started barking, Keller had already been hidden for nearly 58 minutes. Back inside 3B, Max finally relaxed. Daniels gave the command, and the dog returned to his side, eyes still alert, but posture softer. Good boy, Daniels said, giving him a small pat behind the ears. You nailed it. Judge McCarthy finally sat down again, face pale. I've been on the bench for 18 years, she said quietly. I've never seen anything like this. A fugitive hiding in the courtroom under my nose? It's a breach, Henry said. Could have ended badly. Thank God for Max. Keller, still seated and cuffed, looked like the weight of the world had dropped onto his shoulders. He didn't speak again. Didn't resist. He just stared blankly ahead. Daniels leaned over. You got something to say before we haul you. Out of here? Keller blinked slowly, then said, Just tell my brother I came. Even if he never believes it. Daniels said nothing. Outside the courthouse, sirens wailed as backup units arrived. Inside, Max sat upright, ears flicking once more as if still listening for danger, but the moment had passed. The courtroom was no longer tense. It was just quiet. The silence after a storm. And it all began with a bark. It wasn't the first time Daniels had dealt with criminals, but this moment felt different. He kept playing it back in his head, the barking, the fear in Keller's eyes, the eerie silence after they pulled him out from under the bench. This wasn't just another bust. This was something more fragile, more human, and far more dangerous. Officer Henry stood at the far end of the courtroom, radio in hand, updating courthouse command. Fugitive in custody. Identity confirmed. Situation secure. Beginning formal transfer now. Keller still sat on the floor, hands cuffed behind his back, eyes glassy and distant. He looked broken, like a man who had spent months on the run, only to return to the very place he once fled. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Max stood at Daniels' side, finally calm but watchful. His tongue lolled slightly as he sat, tail thumping once against the floor. Daniels reached down and gave him a firm rub behind the ears. "You're getting extra treats tonight," he muttered with a half-smile. The moment of calm didn't last long. The side doors burst open and 2 more deputies entered, followed by Sergeant Ava Reynolds, head of courthouse security. She was tall, confident, and furious. Her eyes immediately scanned the room. "Where the hell is he?" Daniels nodded toward the bench where Keller had been pulled from. "Found him hiding under there. Slipped in during the fire drill this morning." Reynolds' jaw clenched. "And nobody saw him?" "Footage shows him blending in with a group of attorneys," Henry said. "He got in clean." "Unacceptable," Reynolds muttered, walking over to Keller. She crouched low, looking him over like he was a disease. "So this is the ghost." Keller blinked at her, but said nothing. "You know how close you came to being shot?" she asked coldly. "I didn't have a weapon," he whispered. "You didn't need one," she snapped. "You hid in a courtroom where judges, prosecutors, and state witnesses sit. You could have had a detonator, a switchblade, a plan we never saw coming." Keller's eyes dropped. "I didn't. I wasn't going to hurt anybody. I swear." Daniels couldn't help but study him. There was something almost pitiful about the guy, like he knew he was broken. Like he had stopped trying to fight days ago, maybe weeks. "Why the bench?" Daniels asked. "Why come back here at all?" Keller hesitated, then said slowly, "My brother, he's cutting a deal." "I know he is. He said he'd never flip on me, never talk. But people started whispering. I had to know if he'd turn." Reynolds scoffed. "So you just crawled in like a rat and waited to see if his name would come up?" Keller nodded. "I had no plan beyond that. I swear, I didn't eat for 2 days. I didn't even know if I'd get in." Henry looked to Daniels. "You believe him?" Daniels glanced at Max, who still stared at Keller. Dogs always sensed something people couldn't. He wasn't barking anymore. That said something. "I think he's telling the truth," Daniels finally said. "But that doesn't mean this isn't serious." Reynolds stood. "Serious? It's a damn disaster. He compromised the courtroom. He's a fugitive. He passed security and sat under a judge's bench for almost an hour. If your dog hadn't been here, we might never have known." Daniels looked at Max again. The dog stared up, eyes calm, loyal, focused. McCarthy, still sitting silently at the judge's bench, finally spoke. "Let's be clear. I want a full security review. Today. I want every courtroom inspected, every hallway cleared. If this happened once, it can happen again." "Yes, Your Honor," Reynolds replied. The deputies moved to lift Keller. He didn't resist. As they guided him up, his legs wobbled. He looked thinner up close, fragile, even. His hoodie sagged over bony shoulders. His jeans hung loose. He looked like a man who hadn't just been hiding today, but hiding from life. As they led him toward the door, he paused. "Can I say one thing?" he asked, turning to Daniels. Daniels gave him a nod. "I didn't come to do harm," he said again. I wanted to see his face, my brother. I wanted to know what betrayal looked like." Daniels didn't respond. What could he say? That he understood. That hiding under a bench wasn't the answer? That his brother might have already made that deal weeks ago? He said nothing. The doors opened. Keller disappeared behind them, flanked by 2 armed officers. The moment hung in the air, heavy and strange. Henry finally broke the silence. You think he was dangerous? Daniels shook his head. I think he could have been, and that's enough. Max stood again, as if to signal that his job was done. McCarthy rose from her seat. We need to be better. Today, it was a lost man. Tomorrow, it could be something worse. Reynolds nodded in agreement. Every bench in this building will be checked twice, starting now. Daniels walked to the gallery, bent down, and peered under the very bench where Keller had hidden. The space was narrow, the paneling cracked, a hiding place no one would ever think to inspect. Until now. You think he planned it all? Henry asked. Daniels stood up. No, I think he was desperate. And sometimes desperation is more dangerous than any weapon. Max let out a quiet chuff, breaking the tension. Daniels looked down at him. Yeah, buddy. You saw it before. We did. They both walked out together, the quiet of the courtroom behind them, replaced by the flurry of movement in the hallway. Cameras were arriving, reporters asking questions. But none of them had seen what Max saw. They hadn't heard that first growl or the silence that followed. Only Max had known. And because of him, whatever Keller might have done never had the chance to happen. The courthouse was still buzzing. News of the hidden fugitive had spread like wildfire. By the time Raymond Keller was escorted out in cuffs, half the building knew his name. The rest were already searching it online. Downstairs in the courthouse holding area, Keller sat alone in a small room, wrists cuffed to a metal bar fixed into the wall. His head leaned back, eyes closed, the tension finally draining from his body. His breath was steady now, but his mind was racing. Back upstairs, Officer Daniels was reviewing the security footage again. Each frame told the story clearer than words ever could. 8:06 a.m., the fire alarm. A crowd rushed in from the parking lot. Keller had kept his hoodie up, hands in his pockets, eyes low. He looked like he belonged, like he had every right to be there. Damn good chameleon, Henry muttered over Daniels' shoulder. Daniels nodded. He knew where to stand, what pace to walk, how not to make eye contact. He'd done it before. Maybe not here, but yeah, this guy's been watching people long enough to learn their rhythm. Another frame showed Keller slipping into courtroom 3B at 8:14 a.m. Empty. No staff inside yet. He moved quickly, ducking low and disappearing behind the far right bench. And then, gone, invisible, until Max walked in. Henry looked at the time stump. He was under there for almost a full hour. Daniels sighed. If Max hadn't reacted, we would have never known. Not until he made his move. Henry looked up. You still think he wasn't going to do anything? Daniels hesitated. He said he wanted to see if his brother was going to testify. Maybe that's true. Maybe not. I just don't believe someone risks capture over just curiosity. Henry folded his arms. Desperation does crazy things to people, and betrayal that makes people act irrational. Daniels nodded. Yeah, but he was too calm. He wasn't panicked. He was waiting. For what? Daniels stared at the paused screen of Keller, crouched beneath the bench, completely still. That's what I'm afraid to find out. Meanwhile, in a secure interview room, Detective Mallory, a no-nonsense investigator from the Fugitive Apprehension Unit, sat across from Keller. Let's talk about your brother, she said bluntly. Keller said nothing. Mallory continued. You haven't seen him since you ran, have you? No, but you heard he was testifying against you? Keller looked up, expression unreadable. I heard he was making a deal. Where'd you hear it? Doesn't matter now, does it? Mallory leaned in. Here's what matters. You snuck into a courthouse, hid under a bench, and watched a courtroom full of armed officers, legal professionals, and witnesses. That's a threat to public safety, whether you brought a weapon or not. Keller's jaw tightened. I didn't have a gun. I didn't have a knife. Hell, I didn't even have breakfast. Then why come? Keller leaned back in his chair. You ever have someone close to you turn on you? Mallory didn't answer. Keller went on, voice low. He and I. We used to be tight. Same house, same parents, same hustle. But when I took the heat for both of us, he vanished. No letters, no messages. Then I hear he's working with the DA now, selling out everything we lived for. I had to see it. Mallory clicked her pen slowly. You weren't there to talk. You were hiding. That suggests intent. I didn't trust myself to talk, Keller admitted. I didn't know how I'd react if I saw him say it out loud. Mallory wrote something in her notebook. You've added at least 3 more charges to your record. You're looking at serious time now. Keller didn't respond. Just looked away, but his silence wasn't defeat. It felt more like surrender. He knew what he'd done. He just didn't care anymore. Upstairs, Judge McCarthy was in her chambers, speaking with Sergeant Reynolds. This wasn't just a breach, she said firmly. This was a message. Reynolds raised a brow. You think it was personal? Not toward me, the judge said, but the justice system in general. These people, fugitives, traffickers, they don't just run anymore. They watch. They plot. And when they come back, it's not just to hide. It's to remind us that they're not gone. Reynolds nodded. We're doing a full sweep of every courtroom today. And I'm putting together a risk report. From now on, benches will be checked before each session. McCarthy folded her hands. Good, but don't forget, if it weren't for that, dog, we'd still be sitting above a man with nothing to lose. Later that afternoon, Officer Daniels returned to the K-9 unit office where Max lay on his mat, gnawing lazily on a reward bone. Daniels sat down beside him, rubbing his fur gently. You saved a room full of people today, he said softly. And you didn't even have to bite anyone. Max wagged his tail, then stretched, laying his head down. Calm again. Safe again. Daniels looked over at the wall, where a photo of Max with his training certification hung proudly beside other K-9s of the department. Each one had a story. Each one had made a difference. But today, Max's instincts had outmatched every camera, every guard, every metal detector. Because instincts couldn't be tricked. Daniels stood, opened his locker, and took out a small golden tag, a medallion engraved with the department logo. He knelt down beside Max and clipped it onto his collar. You earned this, he said. Max didn't react, just looked. Up, eyes full of trust, and rested his head again. Daniels stared at him for a long moment. He hid in plain sight, he whispered to himself. And you saw what none of us did. As the day wound down, courthouse staff moved benches, inspected vents, and rechecked security zones. News outlets picked up the story. Online headlines read, Fugitive found hiding under courtroom bench. K-9 officer saves the day. Betrayed brother or secret plot. The Keller courtroom incident. But for those who were there, for Daniels, for Judge McCarthy, for everyone seated in courtroom 3B that morning, it wasn't just a strange story. It was a chilling reminder. That sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one you never saw. And sometimes the only reason you live to tell the tale is because a dog wouldn't stop barking. By nightfall, the entire courthouse had returned to silence. Empty halls echoed with every footstep, the buzz of earlier events now only lingering in memory and on news sites across the country. Reporters had started calling it the bench incident. But for those directly involved, the reality was far more unsettling than any headline could capture. Down in the city's detention center, Raymond Keller sat in a dimly lit interrogation room, not cuffed, but not free either. Two detectives watched him through the mirrored glass, unsure what to make of the man who had managed to infiltrate a courthouse full of law enforcement. Detective Wallace finally pushed the door open, carrying a file, thin but dangerous. "You know," Wallace said as he sat down, "for someone wanted in 3 states, you don't look like the kind of guy who hides under furniture." Keller smirked weakly. "I've done worse." Wallace flipped the file open. "Let's go over it again. You walk into the courthouse during a fire alarm. You're wearing clothes similar to courthouse maintenance staff. You slip past security. Unnoticed, enter courtroom 3B and crawl under a bench. All of this just to, what? Watch your brother testify?" Keller leaned back in his chair. "That was the plan. Just watch. Nothing more." Wallace gave him a look, the kind only seasoned cops give when they smell a lie. "That's not what I see here. You're a felon on the run. You know the courtroom schedule. You come in on a day your brother's on the witness list. You hide. That's not random, Raymond." Keller's jaw clenched. "He was supposed to stand with me. That was our rule. Whatever happened, we'd never flip." Wallace tilted his head, but he flipped. Keller looked away, his voice quieter now. "They offered him a deal. Testify against me, and he walks free. I didn't expect him to say yes." Wallace paused. "You were going to kill him." "No," Keller snapped quickly. "That's what everyone assumes. That I was waiting for the right moment to lunge or pull a weapon. But I wasn't. I swear it." "Then what were you doing?" Keller hesitated, eyes dark with something more complex than anger. "I needed to see if he meant it," he said finally. "With my own eyes. Words in a report don't hit like the truth in someone's face. I didn't want revenge. I wanted closure." Wallace raised a brow. "You were ready to risk a lifetime. Behind bars, just to confirm your brother betrayed you?" Keller nodded. "Seems like a hell of a price for peace of mind." "Everything else was already gone," Keller said. "Family, friends, future. If all I had left was the truth, I wanted it raw. No filter. No lawyers." Wallace leaned back. For a moment, the room fell into a heavy, aching silence. No more questions. No more tactics. Just 2 men on opposite sides of a very broken life. Meanwhile, Officer Daniels sat outside with Max by his side, flipping through a thick report on the Keller brothers. He'd requested the full backstory, and what he read shook him. The 2 brothers had grown up in poverty, raised by an addicted mother and a string of abusive foster homes. They had survived by sticking together, stealing food, selling scrap, working odd jobs under the table. When Raymond turned 18, he took full responsibility for a warehouse robbery that both had been involved in. He went to prison. His brother walked free. But while Raymond hardened behind bars, his younger brother changed. He got clean, found work, and eventually got caught up in another crew. This time, it was worse. Federal-level drug operations. When the bust came down, prosecutors wanted the bigger players. The younger Keller had only one card to play, his brother. And he played it. Daniels closed the file and looked at Max, who was now half asleep on the grass beside him. "You smelled more than danger in that courtroom," he whispered. "You smelled a broken bond." Max thumped his tail once, lazily. The next morning, news cameras lined the outside of the courthouse. Interview requests poured in for Officer Daniels, for the judge, and even for the K-9 unit. But Daniels declined them all. "This isn't a hero story," he told one eager reporter. "It's a warning." Meanwhile, inside the courtroom, a new hearing was underway, a pretrial motion for Keller's charges. The judge glanced once at the bench, now fully inspected and cleared, before addressing the courtroom. "The defendant will remain in custody," she said, "and the court will not speculate on intent. But let it be recorded that this court owes its security today not to locks or metal detectors, but to a dog's intuition." That night, as Daniels sat in his patrol vehicle filling out final reports, a quiet knock came on his window. He looked up to see Keller's public defender, a tired woman with sharp eyes. "Mind if I ask something off the record?" she said. Daniels nodded. "Why do you think the dog barked?" Keller had no weapon. He hadn't moved. Most dogs wouldn't have noticed him. Daniels stared ahead, silent for a few seconds. "He didn't smell danger," he said finally. "He smelled adrenaline, fear, guilt, maybe betrayal." The lawyer furrowed her brow. "You think dogs can smell betrayal?" Daniels half smiled. "I think dogs know when someone's heart is breaking, even if we don't." She nodded. Slowly. "Well, if that's true, your dog might be the best therapist this city has." And with that, she walked off into the night. Later, in his cell, Raymond Keller sat on the edge of his bunk, replaying everything in his mind. Not the courtroom, not the officers, not the fear. Just his brother's voice, the last time they spoke. A whispered promise made under streetlights years ago. "No matter what happens, I've got your back." And now, that voice was gone, replaced by silence. And the echo of a dog's bark, the only thing honest left in the room. The next morning, the sun rose over the county with a strange stillness. But within the courthouse, and far beyond it, the name Max had begun spreading like wildfire. Local news outlets ran the headline: "Canine dog uncovers fugitive hiding." In packed courtroom, chaos averted. By noon, national reporters had picked up the story. CNN, Fox, NBC, they all had something to say about the German Shepherd who done what cameras, guards, and metal detectors couldn't sense human intent. But Max didn't know he was trending. While reporters set up tents and boom mics. Outside, Max sat quietly in the back of the K9 unit van beside Officer Daniels, panting softly as the morning heat began creeping in. Daniels handed him a fresh bowl of water and gave him a scratch behind the ears. "You had every reason to bark, buddy," Daniels whispered. "And not a single person in that courtroom believed you at first, but you didn't care." The truth was, Max hadn't just performed a routine detection. He'd shown something deeper, something beyond scent or sound, instinct, judgment, loyalty. That same morning, Sheriff Melton called for a press briefing. Officers, city officials, reporters, and even school groups gathered in the front plaza of the courthouse for a short but powerful ceremony. The sheriff stepped up to the podium. "Yesterday, something extraordinary happened," he began. In a room full of trained eyes and ears, it was Max, a 6-year-old canine officer, who sensed a threat before any of us did. He followed his gut. He barked when it wasn't convenient, when it wasn't quiet, when it wasn't normal. And because of that, lives were potentially saved. Applause followed, hesitant at first, then thundering. Sheriff Melton continued, "Too often, we take these dogs for granted. They sniff out contraband, track missing persons, and walk beside us into the most dangerous situations. But let yesterday be a reminder. They are officers too. Partners, protectors, and in this case, a hero." He motioned to Officer Daniels, who led Max onto the stage in front of the cameras. Max sat tall, tongue out, head high, completely unaware of the hundreds of phones recording his every breath. Daniels stepped to the mic. "Max doesn't need medals," he said simply. "He's happy with tennis balls and beef jerky. But I'll say this, I've never seen a dog so committed to the truth. He didn't bark for attention. He barked because something was wrong. And no matter how many times I told him to stop, he kept going because he knew. That takes more courage than most people ever show. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small badge engraved with the words, Meritorious Service, K9 Unit. On behalf of the department, Max, you've earned this. The crowd erupted in applause once more as Daniels clipped the badge onto Max's harness. Later that evening, back at the K9 training compound, Max had his own little celebration. The department staff had bought him a giant steak, a new chew, toy, and a cooling mat for summer patrols. A few younger officers took selfies with him. Max wagged his tail, enjoying the attention, but his eyes kept drifting back to Daniels, always watching. Daniels sat beside the doghouse, sipping coffee. His mind wasn't on steak or medals. It was on Raymond Keller. He'd seen criminals in all forms, violent, cunning, desperate, but Raymond had haunted him. Not because he was dangerous, but because he was broken in a way that many officers secretly recognized, the kind of man who'd been chewed up by the system, twisted by betrayal, and left with nothing but instinct. The same instinct Max had trusted in that courtroom. It wasn't the fear that triggered Max's barking, Daniels believed. It was the emotion. The storm inside a man who wasn't there to hurt others, but who might have hurt himself. 2 days later, Daniels received a letter at the station. The handwriting was shaky, the paper rough and creased. To Officer Daniels and Max, I want you to know I didn't go there to hurt anyone. I know that's hard to believe. But I had no gun, no knife. Just a lot of pain I didn't know what to do with. When your dog barked, I froze, not because I was scared of being caught, but because someone finally saw me. Maybe not the person I used to be. Maybe not the monster people think I am. Just someone seen. I've spent years hiding from cops like you, but that dog didn't chase me. He didn't corner me. He just barked. And in that moment, I realized I was done running. Tell Max. Thank you. Raymond J. Keller Daniels read the letter 3 times before folding it carefully and slipping it into a file labeled Unusual Events. He didn't show it to the press. He didn't tell the department. It wasn't for them. It was for Max. That weekend, Max got a full rest day. No patrol, no drills, no commands. Just sun, play, and peace. Children who'd heard about the hero dog from court came by the station to meet him. Some brought drawings. Others brought treats. One girl, no more than 6, stood in front of him and asked, "Did you really find a bad guy under the bench?" Daniel smiled. Not a bad guy, just a lost one. Max licked the girl's hand gently. She giggled and handed him a drawing. It showed a dog barking at a shadow, while a heart floated above its head. Daniels taped it above Max's kennel. "You didn't just do your job, boy," he whispered. "You reminded all of us to listen when something feels wrong, even if it's inconvenient, even if people stare, even if they doubt you, because sometimes one bark could change everything." The courthouse was quieter now, but the ripples from the previous week's events continued to spread far beyond its walls. Officer Daniels found himself walking the familiar hallways with a new sense of purpose. Max trotted loyally beside him, his keen eyes scanning every corner, every crevice. They had become more than partners. They were a team that had stared danger in the face and lived to tell the story. The trial was set. Raymond Keller was due back in court to face his charges, from the robbery that had started it all, to the audacious courtroom escape attempt. But as his case approached, the city's mood had shifted. There was sympathy now for the man who once hid beneath a bench. A growing understanding that his story wasn't just about crime, but about broken family ties, betrayal, and a desperate search for truth. In the detention center, Keller sat alone in his cell, preparing for what could be his last chance at freedom. His public defender had filed a motion to allow his testimony to be cross-examined more humanely, citing his fragile mental state. It was a small win, but a critical one. A guard approached and handed him a small envelope. Inside was a letter from Officer Daniels. Raymond, I don't know if you'll read this, but I want you to know that, after everything, you're more than the mistakes you made. That day in the courtroom, when Max barked, you showed us something real, not just fear or anger, but pain. Life will throw us all under benches sometimes, hiding, scared, unsure. What matters is what we do next. I hope you find your way. Officer Daniels Keller folded the letter carefully, a small spark lighting in his eyes. For the first time in a long while, he dared to hope. On the day of the trial, the courtroom was packed. Media from every corner had arrived. Spectators whispered about the man who had dared to hide in their midst and the dog who had uncovered him. Judge McCarthy called the court to order. Keller was brought in, no longer the shadowy figure under the bench, but a man standing. Tall, fragile, but present. His eyes met his brother's across the room, a complicated storm of regret and longing between them. The trial began. Testimonies were heard, evidence reviewed. And through it all, Keller's story emerged not just as a criminal's path, but as a human tale of family, loyalty, and betrayal. Outside the courtroom, Daniels and Max waited silently. They had done their part, but the final chapter was far from over. Later that evening, Daniels received a call from Keller's lawyer. Raymond's plea deal is accepted, she said. With time served and good behavior, he could be out in under 5 years. More importantly, the court has ordered counseling and rehabilitation support. Daniels exhaled slowly, relief washing over him. He's not out of the woods. The lawyer added, but this is a start. That night, Daniels sat with Max under the stars. The city lights twinkled in the distance. You know, Max, Daniels said softly, it's easy to see dogs as just animals doing a job. But you showed me something different. You showed me that sometimes the heart of a hero beats beneath fur and paws. Max gave a quiet woof, as if in agreement. Daniels smiled. The world can be a dark place, but if one bark can stop danger, and one man can find redemption, then maybe there's hope for all of us. Max rested his head on Daniels's knee, and in that quiet moment, the bond between man and dog was stronger than ever.